It is Tuesday, December 30th. We have 2 days before the new year. So those of you who haven't made your New Year's resolutions, you don't have long left. On the other hand, you do have many, many days of shopping left before Christmas. Those of you who are so inclined to think on the bright side. So let's jump into tonight's questions that have been sent in. And feel free to submit your questions as we go. We have one long letter that was sent to me by a lady from Florida, and I'm going to kind of summarize it because it was quite long. She's bulimic and has been for many years. It sounds like about 10. She just can't live with an extra pound of fat on her body, which is a problem I have a hard time identifying with. I've never had any difficulty at all living with an extra pound of fat. But I've known many people like her. The idea of fat just disgusts her. So she keeps it off at all costs, usually with bulimia, but sometimes with anorexia. And yet, after reading the Real Love book and after talking with people who have saner heads, she finally realizes that this obsession has literally been killing her. She's been hospitalized for health reasons 3 times, at least, and attempted suicide once. As I said, she read the Real Love book, and she understands that the root of her problem has been that all of her life she's not felt unconditionally loved. And from bulimia, she gets a number of things. When her body is thin, she gets the praise of people who say, oh, well, now don't you just look so thin, which in our society is huge. I mean, on every magazine cover, who do you see? You don't see plump people. In fact, you don't even see average people. You see women who are just skinny, women who starve themselves. In fact, bulimia is just epidemic amongst models. And so she looks like them. So as people see her, they say, well, just don't you look sharp? And she really enjoys that. And she also gets a feeling of power in her life. This is something that's only become appreciated about bulimia, in recent years, and that is that most people who don't feel unconditionally loved have a feeling of being powerless, out of control. And anorexics and bulimics, as they starve and as they purge, they get a feeling of real control over their diets and over their bodies. I mean, they literally sculpt their bodies. They get also a control of power over what they eat, a power over their diets, and kind of as a secondary little thing, many of them get a feeling of power over other people. Many children, for example, who are bulimics, 11, 12, 14-year-old kids, here are parents who are saying, oh, eat, 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 here, have another bite to eat. These are kids who, as they are throwing up and as they're anorexic, get to say, essentially, shove it up yours. I can do whatever I want to. So there are a number of different ways that they get a feeling of power. It's on multiple levels. So you can see from anorexia and from bulimia, there are multiple streams of imitation love. It's really quite rewarding. And yet people wonder, gee, what do you get from that? A lot. And there have been, a number of famous people literally starve themselves and purge themselves to death. And we think, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, actually, it makes a lot of sense. No different than somebody who would use alcohol to death, or drugs to death, or would be a sex addict to death, and so on. If we get enough reward from imitation love, we will use an addiction until we die. No different than this. And she continued in her letter and explained that she is in a relationship and wonders if it isn't, and of course, she's using imitation love in her relationship with her boyfriend and driving him crazy, because anybody who uses imitation love uses it everywhere. And so, of course, she demands imitation love from him, and then he gives it to her, but it's never quite the right kind, and it's never enough, and then he gives it to her and she feels better for a little while, but then that wears off and she goes back and demands more, and it's an endless, insane cycle. And so she's in a relationship, and she understands it's nutty, this whole bulimia thing, but then she says, well, but I wonder if it isn't natural to want at least some reassurance from my boyfriend that I'm attractive. So she says, I understand that my need for reassurance that I'm attractive is sort of off the deep end, but isn't it okay if I want some reassurance that I'm attractive? Well, yeah, I mean it's natural to want it, but you see, we use that isn't it natural thing to excuse all manner of pathologies. For example, people who are overweight say, isn't it natural to eat? Well, yeah. And then if we do that natural thing and overdo it, we end up dead. Isn't it natural to get angry? Yes. And it's also selfish and unloving and deadly. So, is it natural that you would want some reassurance that you're attractive? Yeah. And also exceptionally dangerous. Because the moment that you ask for some expression from your boyfriend that you're attractive, a sequence of events occurs that uniformly, in your case, leads to disaster. Probably, most of the time, he'll tell you that you do look nice. I mean, you'll say, well, how do I look? I mean, how often, those of you who think this is limited to bulimia, I mean, crazy. How often do women say to each other, not just to their boyfriends and husbands, but to each other, well, how do I look? I mean, hello, who's going to give a truly sincere response to that? Most of the time we lie. Oh, you look great. We say it just automatically. Even if we do give a sincere response, the end result is not going to be good. So let's say that he tells you, you look nice. The actual problem with it, and he means it, the actual problem with that is that you will like it. And for you, it's like a hit of cocaine. You love it, and it keeps you coming back for more and more. Now, why is that a problem? Because that little bit of imitation love will never make you happy, not genuinely happy, because you know that you bought it first by manipulating him for it. You asked him for it. I mean, it wasn't freely given. You asked him for it. And because you bought it by being thin enough. You had to do something for it in just as real a way as though you had paid him money for it. Just as though you'd given him $20 and said, okay, love me. Just as real as though you'd paid him. And because you buy it, you cannot feel loved unconditionally. So you're doomed. So you still believe that you have to look a certain way, which is why you obsess over how you look. And ironically, this makes you believe that you are fat. It's your belief that you have to look a certain way, which leads you to believe that you're fat, because you'll never believe that you look good enough. And this is a huge obstacle to you. You can't keep ignoring this central problem that you believe that you have to look a certain way, because it's causing you to stumble almost every day. In fact, probably many times a day. Everywhere you go, probably without thinking about it, but I suggest that in a given day, you start counting how many times you think about it. As you step outside the door, I'm guessing that many times a day, your eyes are looking around to see if people are looking at you, to see if they're looking at your body, to see if they're gauging whether you are attractive enough. You're thinking about it all the time. So it's a huge obstacle to your happiness. And you'll never feel truly loved until you let go of this control that you have over your body by purging or not eating, either the bulimia or the anorexia route. And it's a leap of faith, or it will be on your part, to let go of this control. So faith means doing something without evidence of how it's going to turn out. It means you doing something without controlling it. So in this case, what would that look like? In your case, it might mean just eating and trusting that you'll be loved. Grow some fat. Grow some of that ugly, awful, disgusting fat that you're so terrified of. And see whether people will still love you. Grow it and look at it in yourself. Allow your boyfriend to see it on you, and don't manipulate him and tell him what he's supposed to say when you have it. Don't tell him how to feel about it. Just let it happen and see if people still accept you. Now, the thing is, some people won't. Actually, I hope they don't. Because you have to discover that there are some people who do conditionally love you, conditionally accept you, which of course means that some people conditionally don't accept you when you're not skinny like a rail, like a model. There will be some people who will go, putting on a few pounds, aren't you? There's no risk if some people don't fall by the wayside if you become heavier. You find out who your true friends are, what people unconditionally love you, as you change, as you don't pay them off. That's how you find out. But that's the only kind of love in life that's worth having. And as you quit controlling and allow yourself to feel accepted for who you are, which is not who you are thin, it's who you are under any conditions, only then are you going to feel unconditionally loved. And as you absolutely rigidly maintain yourself like this under those conditions, you're never going to find out what it's like to feel unconditionally loved. Are you willing to take that risk? I don't know. Up to you. I talked on the phone recently to a woman that I had counseled with. I'm not suggesting, by the way, you turn into a blimp. I'm just suggesting that you take a risk and put on a few pounds and see what happens. For a bulimic, a few pounds would be, like 10. Suggesting, you break the 100-pound barrier. I laugh because that'd be, like one of my legs. I talked on the phone recently to a woman that I had in the past counseled with about her marriage. She had been married to a woman, or to a man, who, although she could have been married to a woman, but she'd been married to a man who had been controlling her for a number of years to a staggering degree. The man that she was married to was just a phenomenal controller, to the point that he virtually owned her. She'd become an object, a slave. And it had happened gradually over a period of time to the point that she hardly even realized that she was being owned. She used to be a fun, happy person to a degree. And when I met them, what they were looking for was what could they do to make their marriage happier. And it really kind of took me pointing out to her that she had become an object, a dish rag. She'd become a piece of property to him before she recognized how vastly she'd changed over the previous several years. And, you know, he was such a fun, articulate, engaging person that over a long period of time, she had just come to accept the fun that he offered, the praise that he occasionally gave her, for the absolute power that she completely gave up to him. And over time, the rewards that he had once given her had completely worn off, so that she was left with nothing. She was just left with an empty shell of life, while she continued to give him all the power that he wanted. So she'd really just become an empty nothing. And their marriage had become pretty much a one-sided deal. So I recommended that they learn about real love, both of them. And she kind of dived into it and learned all about real love and learned to tell the truth about herself and learned to tell all the truth about her being a victim and learned to tell the truth about how she had withdrawn and how she had lied and completely given herself, up to the relationship and so on. And he made promises to learn, but, he really never kept any of them. And she began to realize that that's what had happened. And so, eventually she asked me, what should she do? Because their relationship was pretty obviously a one-sided deal. And so my question to her really was, well, what do you want? Do you want to be happy or not? And she said, she did. She said, I want a relationship that's filled with unconditional love and with happiness. And so my question to her is, I don't tell people to get divorced under most circumstances. I mean, every once in a while, if, a guy is chasing his wife consistently around the house with a raised knife or a gun, I do make that recommendation, but not usually. My question to her is, so what have you been observing in your husband over the last 6 months? Does he show any signs of being willing to tell the truth about himself? Any at all? No. None. Zero. Does he show any signs of being willing to study real love or to learn how to tell the truth about himself or learn how to become unconditionally loving? No. None. Zero over the previous 6 months. So what do you think the odds are that you're going to find an unconditionally loving relationship in this marriage? She said, probably none. I said, well, so far, that would seem to be the case. So your decision, the decision that needs to be made is, how long are you willing to stay in this relationship and continue to be, or to continue to learn to become more unconditionally loving and pour unconditional love, real love, in a completely one-sided relationship on your husband until he shows signs of being willing to be unconditionally loving, or till he shows signs of being willing to tell the truth about himself. That's the decision to make. And that's really kind of the decision many one-sided relationships have to come to at some point. And she made the decision that she was not willing to hang in with that relationship any longer. That's a decision that only people who are in such relationships can make. I can't make that decision for anybody. And so she finally sued for divorce and left him, and he was predictably ugly, as controlling people are, and locked her out of the house and, wouldn't let her even take a suitcase of clothes out of the house and kept her from having her household items and all the clothing that she'd accumulated over the years and, the typically ugly things. But she was peaceful. She'd achieved a level of happiness that she had never imagined possible. So I guess the reason for telling that story is that no matter how ugly a relationship is, we can always manage to find a measure of individual happiness. And it also answers the question that I get asked a lot: when do you leave a relationship like that? Well, first you have to find real love for yourself, and then you have to be willing to offer real love unilaterally, one way, to your partner until you decide that your partner shows no evidence at all of being willing to tell the truth or learn to be unconditionally loving. And then you have to decide when that point is. Now, I want to emphasize that some people can stay in a one-way, unilaterally loving relationship for the rest of their lives and still find it rewarding as they love their partner, much as they would stay in a relationship, for example, with a retarded child, or with a partner who was dying of cancer, for example, and couldn't return any service or acts of kindness or whatever it is that was being offered to them. That's a decision I couldn't possibly make for anybody. But I just offer this particular story because it was remarkable how much happier she had become over the last year or so, as she had learned to find love and happiness despite the fact that her husband had found none, and in fact had become just increasingly bitter and angry and controlling and miserable and just awful. It's gotten worse. Here's somebody who wrote and said, my 7-year-old son has a thing with making loud noises and talking loud while his baby brother is asleep. And there was some additional explanation, which I won't go into in detail, but they live in a relatively small apartment, which of course makes it difficult because then that wakes the baby brother up. If they lived in a huge house, it'd be easy just to recommend taking the 7-year-old son and putting him in the other end of the house. Or if they lived on a 20,000-acre ranch, then you could take the 7-year-old son and put him at the other end of the 20,000-acre ranch. But they don't have that luxury. So today he woke up the baby, and we get empty pretty fast as we have done all this work putting the baby to sleep. Anybody who's put a baby to sleep and it takes hours to get the kid asleep knows how frustrating it is to get a kid asleep and then somebody makes a noise to wake the baby up. You want to kill the offending person, the person who makes the noise. You continue. Talking to him, the 7-year-old, doesn't do any good. Consequences don't do any good either. He says he forgets that the baby is asleep. Can you give us some ideas as to what we can do to convince our 7-year-old to stop being loud while the baby is asleep? So, you have to remember that a 7-year-old, and my guess is that your particular 7-year-old really doesn't give a hoot about your sleeping child. And they're selfish. Children are selfish. What they care about is themselves. And my guess is that you have probably not applied consequences, either the right consequences or consistently enough to the 7-year-old to teach this lesson. I'll bet on both. The right consequences and consistently enough. Because at age 7, this lesson can be taught. Now, the reason I make that bet is that I have worked with several hundred sets of parents now, and as parents say to me, I have a 7-year-old, and the 7-year-old is not learning this lesson. And I say, really? So what have you done? Well, we've tried consequences. And just to give you a clue, out of the several hundred parents who have now said to me, he's just not getting this. And so you've done the consequences. Mm-hmm. And have you done the consequences consistently? And they go, mm-hmm. I have yet to meet one set of parents who has consistently applied the consequences. So what they do is the child does the wrong behavior, and then the parents do the consequences, like 60% of the time. Some parents apply the consequences like 3% of the time. And so here's how the child reads that. Let's say that you apply them 60% of the time, which for most parents is remarkably high. Because there you are, you're lying on the couch, you're watching television, or you're doing whatever it is convenient for you. And I get it. But the child makes a noise, the 7-year-old. He makes a noise that is, louder than quiet. And so you're lying there and you're thinking, by the way, 60% is high. My guess is that you do it less often than that, because that's true of most parents. And so the child makes a noise that is mildly disruptive. And so what you think is, well, that was mildly disruptive, but it wasn't too bad. But see, what the 7-year-old is thinking is, that was a loud noise. But my parents, morons that they are, they didn't say anything. Wow, I'll be darned. Nothing happened. Then the child makes another loud noise. Still nothing happens. Well, that's 0 for 2. And he makes another loud noise. That's 0 for 3. After 4 or 5 noises, finally, because you're tired of it, and boy, you really hate being interrupted while you're watching your television show, after about 6 or 8 noises, you finally go, and so then you get up and you say something to the 7-year-old. Well, you're thinking, all right, I'm going to do something here, and I'm going to be consistent about this. Oh, well, honey, you're way too late for that, see? And you're thinking you're consistent, because this is all in one episode. It's all in one time. No, it's not. You're way too late. You have to see it in the world of the kid. He's already made 8 noises. And in fact, you only heard 8. He's probably made 28 noises. Now are you getting the picture? So you just got up and applied a consequence. Listen to me, because I'm not joking. You just applied a consequence for 1 out of 28 noises. This is roughly the odds of roulette. And so the kid's going, consequences? Are you joking? My parents are a joke. So I can pretty much do whatever I want to, whenever I want, and who cares? Because they're not going to do anything. So then when you stand up and go, listen, you can't make loud noises. And the kid's going, well, let's review this. I just did 27 times in a row. What do you mean I can't? Clearly, I can. And you are an idiot. Do you see how smart the kid is? Actually, we're the morons. Or actually, in this case, you are. That doesn't mean I haven't been. I'm just telling you in this case. That's why the kid thinks there are no consequences here. And the kid is right. So you have to apply consequences every single time. Really. You hear a noise that's above a certain level, and you have to define for the kid what the noise is, the level is. So you have to say to the kid, all right, here's the level, here's the level. And as soon as the noise level gets above that, and the child makes it, you have to get up right now. Now, you don't get up with anger. Now, that screws everything up. That's punishment. But as soon as you hear the noise get above that level, I mean, you leap up like a hot poker had stabbed you in the leg. And you get up and you do something immediately. And you have to do something that is strikingly inconvenient for the child. Something the kid really hates. Like what? Parents say, well, what I do is I go in the next room and say, you can't make that noise. Forgive me for laughing. But telling a child that he can't do it after you've already told him, that's not a consequence. That's begging. See? He's already heard that. So what can you do? You do something that's inconvenient. All right, well, if a child is, for example, let's say, watching a show, watching something on the computer, playing a video game, whatever it is, you can bet that the child is using a combination of his eyes and his hands, right? So if you do anything that interrupts the combination of his eyes and his hands, he's going to hate it, isn't he? So if he's 7 years old, let me think. Let's interrupt the interaction of his eyes. I got it. Go to Home Depot, Lowe's if you like. We'd hate to make this a commercial. You don't have to get a clean one. You could just wash one out at home. Get a 5-gallon bucket, a paint bucket. Make it clean so it's not disgusting. And just tell the child that as soon as the noise gets like that, you're going to take the 5-gallon bucket and just take the 5-gallon bucket and turn it upside down, clean, and put it over his head. You'll discover that there isn't a child on the planet that likes to have a 5-gallon bucket put over it. And if he's a small child, it will go over his head and shoulders. Well, a 5-gallon bucket over a child's head and shoulders, you will discover, significantly impairs his vision. They really hate this. It also pins his shoulders in so that he can't move his arms, but he can move his hands. So it doesn't impair his movement. He can still walk around the house, although you will discover that he runs into doors. But he can't play video games. He can still do his homework, however. Which, if you remind him of, he will also hate. But if he holds his homework right under the edge of the bucket, he can do his homework. In other words, he can't do anything fun. So, if he wants to make noise, he can do his homework under the edge of the bucket, but he can't have any fun and he can't watch television. Now, how long do you think he's going to want to have the bucket over his head? We're not talking about putting the bucket over his head all night, but you say, if you want to make noise, you'll have the bucket over your head for, I don't know, 3 minutes. Make it up yourself. You figure it out. We're talking about a short period of time, because if you make it a long period of time, it turns into a punishment, which is not the goal, right? No. The idea is to teach them something. That's always the purpose of a consequence. It's never to punish, it's to teach. So, as soon as the noise level gets out, you leap up, put the bucket over his head, and you go, would you prefer that? And he goes, no, I really wouldn't. Well, if he gets the point, after 2 minutes, take the bucket off his head. Then if he goes to make a noise again, you go, I'm sorry, would you prefer the bucket? You'll discover that after just a few times the bucket, he'll quit making the noise, which is the whole purpose of the thing, right? You don't actually want the bucket on the kid's head, neither does he. If you don't have a bucket, by the way, a salad bowl or whatever else will work. If you're weak-hearted and you can't, anything will do. Anything to interfere with the child having a good time. He'll hate whatever it is. A pillowcase will do. Whatever you got the guts for. And he'll catch on immediately. I can't, and there's a rationale behind it, and you explain it. If you're going to make noises and inconvenience us and your brother who's asleep, then the purpose of this is to inconvenience you, so that you will be reminded, so that it will occur to you, don't make noise. That's the whole purpose of consequences. That's why cops give you tickets. It's not to raise money for the city. It's so that the next time you go to speed, you go, oh yeah, $120 fine, insurance raised, Don't put pedal to the metal. That's it. Same purpose with a 7-year-old kid. And they're not stupid. They'll catch on. Let's see, we have... Oh, do you? Donna's got a couple, because I have another one here about a child, but I won't do that if Donna's got a couple. Somebody actually already sent me that question, and I'm going to... Could you say that telling the truth about yourself, being loving, and accepting love, having faith, and taking risks, that's a lot of things, is a process for reprogramming your subconscious mind, since that is where my feeling of unworthiness are held from childhood? Oh, yeah. In fact, let me put it another way. I was talking to a good friend of mine just a few days ago, and he has been a clinical psychologist for 25 years. And he works a lot. In fact, he works for the United States military. And so he treats quite a number of patients with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disease. So he sees these, oh my goodness, there are something like 300,000 patients now who have come back from Afghanistan and Iraq with post-traumatic stress disease from their experience having served in the armed forces overseas. That's just in these recent wars. Who knows how many there are from past wars. People come from overseas and, having seen the horrors of war, suffer the after effects of having seen, of the trauma of having seen that. And the success of treating these patients is not very good. They treat it with medication, they treat it with talk therapy, and it's not a great success rate. So PTSD is a fairly common diagnosis and causes people a lot of difficulties for many years. I was talking to him, and as I was talking, I said, you know, it's my belief. He's a really bright guy. I've known him for a lot of years. In fact, wow, he and I have been friends for more than 20 years. And I said, it is my belief that virtually all of the significant relationship problems and all of the personal problems that people have in life could be labeled PTSD of childhood. And there was silence on the phone. I said, hello? I said, are we still connected? And he waited. He said, hang on a second. Wait. Another 60 seconds went by, and he said, I think that's true. He said, in the hundreds of patients that I've treated, because he's been a psychologist for 25 plus years, he said, I believe that's true. I said, in what percentage of cases do you believe? I had my own number in mind. He said, I think that's true in all of the years that I've treated patients. I think that's true in 95% of patients or more. The thing that we all need more than anything on the planet is to feel unconditionally loved. It's not like a little bonus that we want, real love. It's not like, it's not the cherry, it's not the whipped cream on top of the cake. It's the cake. It's the meal before the cake. It's the thing. And if we don't get unconditionally loved as children, it's like we were starved to death and beaten and gutted. And if anything else happened in addition, if in addition to not getting unconditionally loved, we were also sexually abused, or we experienced incest, or we were yelled at or slapped or shoved in closets or whatever, not to demean those things or not to slight them, not to diminish them, but those were like almost incidental. It's the not getting loved that traumatizes us beyond belief. So here we are as adults, almost all of us, walking around in a state of post-traumatic stress from having not gotten as children what we need most, unconditional love. And so here our subconscious minds are traumatized. I'm getting back to the question that was asked. Our subconscious minds have been beaten to a bloody pulp. You getting the picture? And so what we do is we tell the truth about ourselves, not just having been traumatized. We tell the truth about the conscious choices that we make. We tell the truth about our own lying, attacking, acting like victims, clinging, withdrawing, all the foolish, stupid, selfish, unloving stuff that we do. And as we do that, and as we feel, because we have come to believe that the world is an unloving, horrifying, traumatic, awful place, which is the condition in which these people with PTSD come back from war, believing that the world is such a place. We have come to believe that the world is such a place as a result of our childhoods. So as we tell the truth about ourselves, what happens is, as we get unconditionally loved by enough people, gradually we come to reprogram our subconscious minds. We come to unlearn what we learned as children, and we come to believe that what we always believed in the past is no longer true. It's huge. You know that age-old saying, well, you can't change the past. Yeah, you can. In fact, that's the whole programming trick of PTSD, is to change the past. Or it's one of the ways that they do it. And we can do that. We can change the ugly, horrifying past and change the world in people's minds and get people to believe, and it's not a trick. It's not okay, you've had a horrifying, awful childhood and you've come to believe that the world's an awful place. So now, just suddenly what we're going to do is put a tambourine in each hand and have you go, ooh, 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 kumbaya, the world is a good place. No, it's not reprogramming by just saying positive little words and saying, no, it's not so. Because that would just be a lie. You reprogram the subconscious mind by actually supplying people with what they didn't have, so that they see that how they believe the world was really isn't true. And that the reason they came to believe that the world was a horrifying place is only because they were surrounded by people who were not loving. And those people were not loving because they simply had never been loved themselves. They didn't know how to love. So the problem wasn't with the whole world. The problem was with those people that they were around, which admittedly was almost everybody. But it turns out that there are exceptions, and that those exceptions, the unconditionally loving people, is how the world is supposed to be and how the world can be. And the more we tell the truth about ourselves, and the more we feel unconditionally loved, and the more we are loving to other people, the more we can create around us a world like that. See? So can we reprogram our subconscious minds? Oh, actually, we can do a whole lot better than that. We can reprogram our subconscious minds, and we can literally can create around us a literal world like that. So that's pretty cool, don't you think? And that's the purpose of what you just said here. Telling the truth about ourselves, being loving and accepting others, and having faith and taking risks is all of those things that I just talked about. It's powerful beyond expression. It's not a trick. It's not a game. It is a world-creating process. Literally a world-creating thing. So, pretty cool, wouldn't you say? It sets us free, and it sets free the people around us. And I've seen this happen over and over and over again. So it's not a theoretical thing. I'm not saying, oh, this could happen in the world someday. No, it happens all the time. Just in this chat, I told you about a lady, do you remember, who came in with her husband, and she was in a horrifying relationship remember I told you about her controlling husband. When she came in, she looked like death warmed over. Her head hung. Her face was ashen. She barely spoke above a whisper. She looked like a whipped dog. She was a miserable human being. And within just, 2.5 months, maybe, she looked like a different creature. Love had transformed her. And I've seen that happen over and over and over again. And she's gone on now to have that not only transform her, but her immediate family and some of her friends and others, and on it goes. And there are hundreds of stories like that. So it's not a trick. It's not a possibility. It's not a theory. It's a power. It's a fact. Let's see. This is somebody that I said I would answer their question tonight, so I'll try to. This is about a child, Fred, who often doesn't get up on time, doesn't do his homework. His parents have a difficult time knowing how to motivate him. And the one parent wrote and said, "My partner warned me that Fred may lie and say that he didn't get up on time because he felt sick. He's pulled that card before to attempt me in an attempt to get out of a consequence or get out of work. She said that he says he's sick, that if he says he's sick, we should tell him that he still can't have any entertainment, like, the computer or games, until all of his work is done. Fred chose not to do any of his work yesterday, even though he was well enough to ask us to play hide and seek in a large house that we were doing work in." He's a homeschooled child and sometimes goes with us to work. It's pretty easy to tell if a child is sick. We think it's hard, but it's really not. And in this case, the child proved it. So he says, "Oh, I don't feel very well." But then he goes with you to work, and then what does he say? "Can I play hide and seek?" I mean, hello? If he can't do his homework, but he can go and play hide and seek, or he can play video games, what's he telling you? He's not sick. He tricked you again. So, clearly, he wasn't sick. Or he might have thought, well, let me think. I think I feel an illness coming on. Come on. And so then what you immediately say is, oh, well, clearly you weren't sick. And so we made this really clear with our kids. They can play that game with you once. And so you make the consequences really obvious. And you do it immediately. So we say to a kid, "You want to play that game with us once? No problem. But if you stay home from school and you are too sick to go to school, and then at home suddenly you become well, we have many possible chores for you to do at home. And you'll engage in them immediately. So, for example, our chore at home was you would dig ditches. And we're not talking about, little itty-bitty ditches, 6-foot deep ditches out in the wet Georgia clay. And so our children learned immediately that staying home from school was not a joke, and you did not stay home from school. If you stayed home from school, you better be bleeding, and not venous blood. It better be arterial spurting blood, and you better have a temperature higher than 105. They did not stay home from school. Not because we'd be irritated, just that if you stayed home from school and you weren't genuinely sick, then you'd be out in the yard digging ditches. So you just make it so that staying home from school is not fun. That's all. And so here's this kid going, can I, play hide and seek? And you go, oh, you're well. And you make it a game. You go, hallelujah, we've got somebody to do some work for us. And you give them a ditch to dig. And then you don't back out of it. See, parents are gutless. They say, oh gosh, maybe he's a little better. And then they have little discussions about it. No, you go out in the backyard, you measure a 6-foot length, and you say, dig this 4 feet deep from here to there. It doesn't matter whether you need the ditch or not. That's irrelevant. And then you just give him a shovel and you say, dig the ditch. And the kid goes, what? What do you mean? You say, well, you're well now. Dig the ditch. You think the child will ever fake being sick again? No. You just calm as can be. That's the end of faking sick. Really. But parents are such spineless weenies when it comes to getting to applying consequences. That's why children do stupid stuff, because there are no consequences, just like I described with the 7-year-old earlier. State policemen are not spineless about giving you tickets, and yet we don't apply that lesson to our children. Wake up. And it's not mean, not at all. You continue. Today his motivation was shot. Now look what you just said. His motivation was shot. Guess why? Because our application of consequences is intermittent, absolutely whimsical, like a roulette wheel, and we're wussy about it. He openly admitted he was stressed by the amount of work he'd need to do in order to get his free time, all of yesterday's and today's, and he's especially slow to complete his math because it's difficult. Lately he works with few breaks and gets his work done to have free time, but today he works but as easily distracts himself, and this self-sabotage is a mystery to us because we know that he's just prolonging his own agony and not able to do the fun stuff until he's done. Now note, earlier you said he was well enough to ask to play, but he chose not to work. You have to stop this foolishness immediately. The instant that a child chooses not to work, you immediately stop and point out what he's doing. And go, you can continue this. You can continue this choosing not to work, but here are the consequences that are piling up. When a child gets overwhelmed, it's because we have allowed the consequences to pile up. You have to teach them sooner. We allow the bad stuff to happen to them too long. We allow them to make dumb decisions too long. Then they get a list of consequences this long, and we go, oh, well, he's feeling overwhelmed. Yeah, you think? We need to say something sooner to them and teach them sooner. Most of the time that children feel overwhelmed is because we taught them poorly. And in our defense, we didn't know how to do it. So remind him of what it's like when he chooses not to work. And then tell him you're on his side. You don't want him in pain. You don't want his consequences to pile up. You want him, we used to say this to our kids, I want you to play. They'll laugh the first time you say that. I want you outside playing. So get your work done now so you can go outside and play. Whereas what we usually do is get that lecture tone in our voice and go, get in there and get your work done. No, say, I want you outside playing. So, sooner you get that done, the sooner you'll be outside playing. And they're going, you're on my side? Yeah, I actually want you to. We used to tell our kids, I want you to be with your friends out goofing around. So in order to do that, get in there and get it done. And then you said that he had to do all of yesterday and today's work before he could get any free time. You know, if you pile up consequences too high, they get discouraged. So you might, for example, say, look, get today's work done, and then you can do some of your free time. Then you can do part of yesterday's before you can do. You might kind of like divide it up into bits, and before he has to like do 100 years of jail time before he gets any of his free time. Again, demonstrate that you're on his side. So, for example, he might go through a third of his homework. And then you say, why don't you come on in here with me and we'll watch television for, 15 minutes. And then you go back in there and do some more, especially when he gets behind. So, again, consequences have to be applied consistently, but once they start, quote, serving time and the consequences get too overwhelming, the purpose of consequences is to teach them. And when they become oppressive, they're not learning anymore. When the kid isn't learning, you're just punishing them and it's killing them. So remember that. Once a kid gets that look on his face like I'm being beaten to death, they're not hearing, they're not learning, and you have to do something different. That's an important thing. Once my kids got that look on their face of Dad's beating up on me, sometimes, boy, I kept going when they were younger. And that was a big mistake on my part. So, we've got too many questions and only about a minute and a half left. So, your questions have been wonderful. We're going to have to keep some of these until next time. The next time I talk to you, it will be the year 2009, which will be exciting. I look forward to talking to you then. Between now and then, I hope you'll continue to send your questions to me at greg@reallove.com. And between now and next Tuesday, just remember that it's always about real love. We'll talk to you then. Bye.